For those who have not yet heard, according to The Guardian, Pope Francis is urging for a climate emergency. And if you had studied about this agenda, then you would know that this climate change nonsense is to push for a so-called Family Day, telling us we need to come back to God and start going to church every Sunday. Businesses will be closed. This has been in the works for a long time. This will be called the Sunday Blue Law. And if you think this will never happen on American soil, oh boy, then that's where you're wrong. Because it already has happened. In 1888, the Blair Bill, which pushed for Sunday legislation and punished anyone who did not abide by this law. Those laws are still in the books. They just don't enforce them anymore. But things are about to change real quick, very shortly from now. Let's look into this article. Pope Francis has declared a global climate emergency, warning of the dangers of global heating and that a failure to act urgently to reduce greenhouse gases would be a brutal act of injustice toward the poor and future generations. He also endorsed the 1.5°C limit on temperature rises that some countries are now aiming for, referring to warnings from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change of catastrophic effects if we crossed such a threshold. He said a radical energy transition would be needed to stay within that limit and urged young people and businesses to take a leading role. Future generations stand to inherit a greatly spoiled world. Our children and grandchildren should not have to pay the cost of our generation's irresponsibility, he said in his strongest and most direct intervention yet on the climate crisis. Indeed, as is becoming increasingly clear, young people are calling for a change. The Pope's impassioned plea came as he met the leaders of some of the world's biggest multinational oil companies in the Vatican on Friday to impress upon them the urgency and scale of the challenge and their central role in tackling the emissions crisis. It followed a similar meeting last year, but this time Pope's stance was tougher as he warned that time was running out and urged them to hear the increasingly desperate cries of the earth and its poor. The chief executives of chairs of BP, ExxonMobil, Shell, Total, ConocoPhillips, Chevron, and several major investors including BlackRock and Hermes responded by calling on governments to put in place carbon pricing and encourage low carbon innovation, and called for greater financial transparency to aid investors. Notice how these big money making businesses met up with the Pope. What does the Bible say in the book of Revelation chapter 18 and verses 1 through 3? And after these things I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lightened with his glory. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, and has become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. For all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her. And the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. This isn't the first time Pope Francis has met up with these merchants of the earth. He has also met up with the likes of CEOs of both Google and Apple and others as well. They are becoming one with this beast power, and they are being waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. Let's continue on. However, they are made no pledges to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions and set no timetable for action. In two statements which came at the end of a 2-day meeting in the Vatican that was addressed by the Pope and led by senior Vatican churchmen, the signatories called for a combination of policies and carbon pricing mechanisms designed in a way that simultaneously delivers innovation and investments in low carbon solutions while assisting those least able to pay. The oil companies' pledges did not go far enough, said Mel Evans, climate campaigner for Greenpeace UK. The oil majors knew all about the risk from climate change many years before most of us first heard about it. They knew where we were heading. They knew their products were the cause, and yet they kept it quiet and lobbied for business as usual, said Evans. And they're still lobbying for business as usual. When it comes to saving the planet, they will do what they are forced to do and no more. Which is why we're having to block them from drilling new oil wells as we speak. Expecting leadership from them is a path to certain disaster. Emissions are rising at their fastest level and close to a decade, BP said this week, leaving an ever shorter period to prevent dangerous levels of global heating. Every year of high emissions takes the world closer to the brink because it adds to the stock of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, which can take a century to dissipate. Last month, the concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere showed the second highest annual increase since continuous records began more than 60 years ago. On Friday, BP served an injunction on Greenpeace ship Arctic Sunrise to try to prevent it joining the activists occupying the oil company's rig in Cromarty, Scotland. Greenpeace is trying to highlight the dangers of new oil drilling, which it says will gravely worsen the climate emergency. In previous speeches, the Pope has slammed the continued search for new fossil fuel reserves and said fossil fuels should remain underground. Bob Dudley, chief executive of BP, said after the Vatican meeting, the world needs to take urgent action to get us on a more sustainable path, and it is critical that everyone plays their part. Companies and investors, governments and individuals. This requires all of us to come together, build understanding, and collaborate to find solutions. Constructive dialogues such as this meeting are essential in aligning key players on the steps needed to accelerate the energy transition while still enabling advances in human prosperity. I am grateful to His Holiness for continuing to support this critical engagement. BP's chief economist warned this week that the world should not rely on the generosity of the private sector when it came to investing in key clean technologies such as carbon capture and storage, and called for the government to use taxpayers' money to fund such initiatives instead. BP's profits doubled last year to a 5-year high as its output of oil and gas soared. Mark Campanelli, founder and executive director of the Carbon Tracker, said, We must forego business as usual, protocols, and short-term market-driven goals, or face environmental and financial ruin of catastrophic proportions. Oil and gas companies have a crucial role to play in transitioning to a low-carbon economy, but must today collectively take those hard decisions in the wake of determined investor and public pressure and unambiguous scientific evidence. The IPCC warned last year that the world had about a decade to bring greenhouse gases under control or face a probable rise in temperatures well beyond the 1.5 C above pre-industrial levels. They warned would bring devastating effects such as droughts, floods, heat waves, and damage to agriculture. And the whole world wonders after the beast. This is just another agenda to get the whole world to come together and unify for the common good. And if you step out of line, you might just be killed. Friends, climate change is a hoax. And I've been saying this way before I heard Donald Trump say it. You want peace and safety on this earth? I'm sorry, brothers and sisters, but you are going to get it as long as Satan is around to steal, kill, and destroy, and he is using this to manipulate the masses so he can be worshipped and you don't even know it. Listen, the Bible makes it clear. The book of 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 verses 3 tells us, "For when they shall say peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh upon them as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape." Don't listen to a mere man. The Pope isn't holy. The Pope is definitely not any father. Not mine. The Pope is no more holier than a hole in the ground. God isn't using him, the devil is, and people need to heed the warning from the Word of God, which says in the book of 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 verses 8 through 12. "And then shall that wicked be revealed, whom the Lord shall consume with the spirit of his mouth, and shall destroy with the brightness of his coming, even him whose coming is after the working of Satan, with all power and signs and lying wonders, and with all deceivableness of unrighteousness, and them that perish, because they received not the love of the truth, that they might be saved. And for this cause God shall send them strong delusion, that they should believe a lie, that they all might be damned, who believeth not the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness." This is referring to the Roman Catholic Church and everyone that decides to follow after this beast. Stay away from the dogmas of this church, friends. They are dangerous, and you'll fall into the fiery depths of hell if you don't heed the warning. I'm sorry, but it's true. Revelation chapter 18 verses 4 through 5 says, "And I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and that ye receive not of her plagues. For her sins have done what? They have reached unto heaven, and God hath remembered her iniquities. Come out of her now, before it's too late." That means stay away. Have nothing to do with this church. Don't listen to her. Don't fall into her traps. God would deal with her soon and save his people. Jesus is coming soon, brothers and sisters. This is John Tinsley with Everlasting Rock Ministries, and always remember, the truth never fails. God bless you.